When it came to the 16-bit generation, you were either a Genesis kid or a Super Nintendo kid, and I was a Genesis kid. I love the Super Nintendo, don't get me wrong, but the thing I played most of my games on was the Sega Genesis. I'm gonna be honest with you, that library holds up to this day. There are some fantastic Genesis games out there. Today, I'm gonna prove it. We're gonna look at 10 Genesis games that I just cannot get enough of.
There's a lot of beat-em-ups on this list, but that's okay because, I mean, that's kind of what the Genesis was to me. It was my brawler machine. And one of my favorites, I talked about it a few weeks ago, it's TMNT, the Hyperstone Heist. This game is just gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's fast, it's fun, it's exciting. It captures the spirit of the cartoon and a little bit of the comics. It's definitely more of the animated series than it is the more aggressive and kind of violent comic books, but it does everything right. Like, I enjoy Hyperstone Heist more than I enjoy Turtles in Time, and I know that's sacrilege for some people, but to me, this just plays faster and feels more like the arcade experience than Turtles in Time does. The game is gorgeous to look at, as it is a Genesis game, and the music in Hyperstone Heist doesn't hit quite as well as the music in Turtles in Time, but I can overlook that, I guess overhear that, or underhear, I don't know. I can ignore that, that's the word I'm looking for. I can ignore that in favor of the fact that I just think the gameplay is so well done. This feels like an arcade experience at home. It plays like it, it animates beautifully, it looks great, and I just cannot tell you how much of a wonderful game it is. Hyperstone Heist is brilliant. Can't wait for the Cowabunga collection to have it on my Switch. It is just a lovely title and just such a great experience for fans of the Turtles. I love Ghouls and Ghosts. I am so glad that I did not stop with this series on the NES, because Ghosts and Goblins was not a game for me. And I'm so happy that a game like this, like Ghouls and Ghosts on the Genesis, exists, because this is such a wonderful arcade port. And while it's still unbelievably difficult, it's a lot more forgiving, not necessarily by being easier, but by being more well-designed than what Ghosts and Goblins is. It feels like a full experience. Ghosts and Goblins just feels cruel for the sake of being cruel. Ghouls and Ghosts is hard, but there's more exciting things that you're able to do. The different magics that you're able to get, the golden armor, the different weapons, everything just looks bigger, feels better in Ghouls and Ghosts. And I mean, yeah, a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a 16-bit console versus an 8-bit, but I don't know. I just think that there's something so completely different in this game than what's compared to the NES D-Make that I love this game. It's very hard. I've never beaten it. I'm terrible at it. I'm lucky I beat the ogre boss in the first level, honestly, because that doesn't happen very frequently for me. But the game itself is something that I treasure and something I go back to frequently, even though I suck at it. And that says something about a game's quality and something about how much I enjoy a title. If I'm willing to keep going back to it despite the fact that I'm awful at it, it's going to be something I'm playing for a long time to come. One of the best things about the Sega Genesis is the fact that it plays like an arcade console in your home. Now, there were arcade ports on the NES, and those were great, and they felt okay, but I couldn't convince myself that they were the same game. Like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, wasn't the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. It was there in name and there in spirit, but it wasn't a one-for-one. And while, yeah, we don't get 100% one-for-one arcade ports onto the Genesis, things like Outrun are so close that I can forgive it because it's just such a wonderful experience. Now, Outrun, if you like arcade racers, if you play things on the Switch like Slipstream, this is a game that if you have never played it, you need to check out because it's such a simple, easy to digest design. You drive, you can shift your gears up and down, and as you go, you need to hit your checkpoints to make sure that you're able to keep driving as you go through this map. You're going to be able to choose different paths and find different areas throughout the world that you're able to go to. It's just such a simple, fun game. It has great music. It has a great stylized design. There are some things where you're going to get some flashing screen warnings, so if you do have issues with flashing screens, this might not be the game for you, but I love it. I have a lot of fun with it, and it's something that I loved in the arcade, and getting it at home on the Genesis just speaks volumes to how wonderful of an experience it is. I remember playing Rocket Knight Adventure when it released and falling head over heels in love with it and then completely forgetting about it. Like, it was a game that I rented, I enjoyed, I thought it was a brilliant game, and then I completely forgot about it for like 15 years. And there was a remake that was released on Steam, and I saw it, and I was like, why does this little Possum guy look so familiar to me? And I started playing it, and I was like, oh my god, it was the Genesis game that I loved so much that I used to rent from the apothecary. And being able to get back into it on the Genesis and just falling right into it. Now, I'm not going to tell you this is the perfect platformer. It's not the perfect platformer. It definitely has its flaws. There's definitely things that it does that just don't work for modern gamers, but to me, this is kind of an unbelievable exercise in what platformers could be when they weren't beholden to previous designs. Things like the Mario games kind of fell in line with what games had come before. Things like the Sonic games followed the same beats that they had in previous versions. But Rocket Knight, this was completely new, and it was excellent. The ability to blast off and launch yourself over barricades, the sword that you have, being able to hang from different grind rails and things like that as you slide along and go launch yourself up, it's really just a wonderful experience. There's so many amazing platformers on the Genesis that it's hard to pick just one, and I mean, spoilers, I have another one in here as we go, but Rocket Knight to me is just one of those games that I love and I go back to all the time. It's a brilliant game. If you've never played it, it's worth checking out. It does something a little bit different than any other platformer out there, and I think that should be celebrated. Game Ground is one of those games that I didn't really play when I was younger, but as I got older, I kind of picked it up on a whim and realized how incredible this game really is. This is just unbelievable arcade action at home on your Genesis, and it's a really tricky game. So as you play, the idea is to get your characters to the exit. That or defeat all the enemies on the screen, and that's not as easy as it sounds. It's a really tricky, difficult game because the characters you start off with have different abilities. You have the caveman that can throw his spear in all different directions. You have the guy with a gun, and you have the girl with grenades that can only shoot or fire their grenades forward in a straight line. So you have to pick the right character for the scenario, and if you lose a character, you're stuck with only one of the characters you have left. Now, one of the things I really love about this game is that you can pick up different characters as you play. There will be things that look like little statues on the map that are kind of shining different colors, and if you grab them and get to the exit, you're going to be able to use them in subsequent levels. It's a really stupidly simple and brilliant design that really harkens back to just what makes video games great. You take such a simple concept of beat the enemies or escape, and you put this clever spin on it of the different characters you're able to unlock, the different abilities that they all have, and the different way that each character plays, and it just makes Game Ground an unbelievably exciting and fulfilling experience. So I have to admit, for the longest time, I didn't really understand what the big deal was about Castlevania Bloodlines. I was a huge Super Castlevania 4 fan, and there was just something about that omnidirectional whip that you could use in that game that really captured me. Going back after I got the Sega Genesis Mini and playing it then and continuing to play it now, I see what the brilliance is in the game. It's an absolutely masterfully crafted version of the original Castlevania with enough changes and enough alterations to the original pacing and kind of layout of how things go to make it completely new and completely interesting for a Sega console. I really like that you're able to choose from two different characters in this. The game feels completely different depending upon who you're using, and that's really what you're looking for in a game like this. Gorgeous graphics, really good sound for a Genesis game. Sound is usually where Genesis games kind of fall on their face, but this one actually has really good sound. Konami really kind of nailed it on this one. I've been going back and playing this a lot since I got my Genesis Mini, and I really can't say enough good things about this. Everyone who told me I was wrong for liking Super Castlevania 4, well, I'm not going to say you're right, because I still like Super Castlevania 4 as well, but you were right about this game. Comix Zone is the most NES hard game, I think, on the Genesis to me. There's other games that are really difficult, stuff like Gunstar Heroes and things like that are super, super hard games, but Comix Zone is the one that I think is probably the most unforgiving, and I think that might be why I keep coming back to it. For one, the game is gorgeous. This is an absolutely brilliant layout and something that hasn't really been done a lot since this game or before this game. Framing things within comic book panels and making you actually move through the story and having a bit of a choose-your-own-adventure as well, depending on what path you take, really is kind of magical and is just an absolutely fantastic experience to play. I love this game. I think it's an absolutely fantastic beat-em-up. It does something that no other beat-em-up game does by putting you in this really stylized and just slick environment that most beat-em-up games kind of default to just this grungy cityscape that you're fighting your way through. And yeah, you have that in Comix Zone, sure, but having it set in the panels and having the eraser and having the different abilities and having the conversation that the character has with his creations in the comic itself just really sets Comic Zone apart. There's so much appeal to this game and so much it does unbelievably well that I have come back to it for decades, and I will continue to play it for decades to come. What more really needs to be said about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 than has already been said, but I mean that doesn't really make for good video content, does it? So let me give it a shot here. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 does so much so well and improves upon so many areas from the first game, but does it so subtly that it doesn't feel like it's something that's unfamiliar. You still feel like you're playing a Sonic the Hedgehog game, just with some serious quality of life improvements. Of course, we get the introduction to Tails. Worlds are a little bit shorter. You only have 2 rounds in them as opposed to 3. The music is fantastic. The design of the game is beautiful. The boss fights are a lot of fun. The bonus rounds are excellent. There's so much that this does perfectly well. It is a very unforgiving game, as every Sonic the Hedgehog game is, and it just feels so fast that it lives up to its namesake, and it just delivers on every promise that the game made when it was first revealed. It's something I go back to all the time. I play it on my Switch, I play it on my Genesis, I play it on handhelds with emulators. It is something I love and I have loved for 30 years, and I will love it forever. It is a brilliant title. Everyone has played it at this point, and if you haven't, do it. I really think it's a shame that the Genesis didn't have more readily recognizable RPGs on it, because most of them went to the Super Nintendo, and while that is true, there were definitely some games on the Genesis that really stuck out to me. Everyone knows the Phantasy Star series, it's a fantastic series, but for me, Shining Force was the way to go, and Shining Force is such a lovely, interesting take on what a tactical RPG could be. This was one of the first tactical RPGs I'd ever played, and it's so smartly designed and so cleverly written that you just kind of fall in love with the characters. The ability to move yourself around the battlefield and position yourself and think a couple steps ahead about where you want to set your characters up and what you want to do with their attacks or their magic or their healing really was different than anything I had personally experienced at the time. Now, it's kind of old hat now, things like Final Fantasy Tactics, Fire Emblem, Advance Wars, but Shining Force was the first I had ever really seen and the first I had ever really experienced, and it did something that nothing else had ever done for me at that time, and it made me want to think a little bit more ahead with how I was playing my RPGs. It's a brilliant game. If you've never played Shining Force, it is worth tracking down either in physical form or picking up something like the Genesis Mini or the Sega Genesis Collection on the different platforms that are available today on modern consoles, and checking out.
Told you I'd prove that the Genesis library holds up to this day. There's 10 that I can't get enough of. Let me know what your favorite Genesis game is that you keep coming back to down in the comments. Check out the video linked up here right now if you want to see the 10 NES games that I can't get enough of. And thank you to my patrons that you're seeing on screen. Until next time, I've been Jay. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.